Here we are at chapter 13. This week we'll be working with loops in R. So learning about loops in R, we will be performing certain tasks that may require you to do them multiple times. Instead of writing or copying and pasting the same code twice, you can write blocks of code that loop a certain amount of times. Loops can include if, for, and while, and I'll be diving into that in just one moment. So here we're going to be covering the if statements. The syntax of an if statement is if you place a condition within it, and then in curly brackets you're gonna put the block of code that you want to operate. The condition in the statement should be a logical test or an R expression that can end up being true or false. So on the right here, just a very quick notation of how the syntax should be put together. Continuing on with the if statement. So the block of code is defined by the user, so it must meet your requirements of the condition and the block of code. Condition must be logically true, but not necessarily true in nature. So what does that mean? If we take a look on the right, we have the first if statement, which is starting off with the number num has a value of 4. So if num is less than 0, print the number is negative. If num is greater than 0, print the number is negative. So here we see that that logically the second statement is true, and whatever is inside the block of code will run. Learning for loops in R. So following the same structure as before, the syntax of a for loop is for, value and condition, and within the curly bracket is your executable code. Very similar to your if statement. For loops are great in scenarios that require you to repeat a chunk of code numerous times within a certain condition. So running a for loop requires the iterative variable and the variable that contains the values. So something I want to be able to cover here is that on the right you see for value in vector print 1 run. What it's doing there is, one, your iterable variable or your iterative variable is what you see there as value. Your variable of data is that vector. So you're telling the function to run through each element in that vector, but print 1 run per element. So there are 4 elements in the vector, which means 1 run is going to run 4 times. For loops can iterate through the iterable variable, which will run through each element as I just stated. This example iterates through the elements in the vector, not the index value of the element. So something different from before is that instead of printing the amount of times that's our elements in the vector, you're going to be printing each element within the vector. Learning while loops in R. While loops rerun a chunk of code while the condition remains true and then breaks when the condition is false. The syntax is similar to the if statement, except it uses while. Each iteration, the loop checks if it is still true for it to continue. While loops don't return a value, so remember to assign a variable to save the results to. While loops are great to run simulations, such as how long it will take you to run out of money while gambling. This is just a good example found within your textbook here, that it's going to iterate the amount of time it's going to take to meet a certain condition. Here we see just what was stated. You want to start with an assigned value, assign the results to a value, and then you can play it back and forth as many times as you want with different values. So the function here is called plays till broke, is going to run a while loop, and at the very end it'll print off the result. Now, repeat loops are even easier than while loops since they run until you stop it by exiting the loop or setting a break command. Your basic syntax is going to be the word repeat followed by a block of code to follow through. On the example to your right, we have a function named plays till broke. We're going to pass in a value named start with. We're going to assign it to an object called cache. N is equal to 0, so it's going to repeat until you get to 0. So starting with 100, it'll repeat 237 times. Now, exiting the repeat loops via break statement. The break statement can be used to exit a repeat loop once a certain condition is true. This is usually paired with another statement to ensure the condition is explicitly stated. So on the right, we see an if statement within the function. If cache is less than or equal to 0, break. It gets you out of the function, and that's the last value you're gonna keep from the while loop. Now, one more concept that I want to cover before ending is the next construct is a statement used that instructs R to continue the iteration under certain conditions. Uses a stepwise process where iteration N occurs, checks the condition. If met, stops. If not, it moves to the next iteration. So unlike the while loop that keeps going until it meets a certain threshold or you exit, the next construct is going to run once. It's going to check the condition. If it can continue to go, it will go, but to the next one in a step-by-step manner.